My name is Alice. I still vividly remember that Thanksgiving dinner, the moment when I pressed play on my phone and everything changed. The room fell silent as my 8-year-old daughter's voice filled the air. Grandma said the lake house is for real family. Mommy, why aren't we real family? Are we pretend? My mother's face paled instantly. Her perfect smile froze, and the mask she'd worn for so long started to crack. The 25 relatives sitting around the table stared in shock, their forks dropping to their plates. I looked at my mother, and all the years of silence, excuses, and watching my daughter feel left out came crashing down on me. Let me take you back to the beginning. Every summer, my mother invites the whole family to her beach house in Malibu for 2 weeks. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and their kids all gather there for a fun-filled vacation. But for the past 8 years, she's called me in April and said there's no room for me and my daughter, Ava. The beach house is a large, 2-story mansion with 5 bedrooms upstairs and a spacious guest suite downstairs. It has a beautiful patio overlooking the ocean and a private beach. I have so many wonderful memories from there. I learned to surf on that beach when I was 10, and my dad was right there with me, cheering me on. When I was 5 months pregnant with Ava, my mother called. Her voice had that fake, apologetic tone. Honey, the house is just packed this year. And with you being pregnant, the drive is so long. Maybe next summer. I agreed because it seemed reasonable at the time. Pregnant and a long drive? Sure, next summer. But the excuses kept coming. Ava's too little. All that noise would be too much for her. Cousin Sarah's bringing her whole family. We really have no space. Every April, my phone would ring, and I'd already know what she was going to say. And every June, I'd scroll through Instagram and see all the family photos. Everyone was having a great time on the beach, building sandcastles, and swimming in the ocean. My sister, Emily, and her 2 sons were always there. They always had a place. I knew the real reason. It was because of my husband, Jake. He's from a different cultural background, and my mother has always been narrow-minded. But proving it was another thing. One October, I called my Aunt Carol to catch up. She's my mother's younger sister, a straightforward and honest woman. Mid-conversation, she said, Alice, I'm glad you're reaching out. Your mom said you've been so busy that you don't want to come to the beach house anymore. I was stunned. I never said that, I replied. My mother had been spreading lies, making it seem like I'd chosen to stay away. I called my mother directly to set things straight. I kept my voice calm. Mom, I just talked to Carol. She thinks I don't want to go to the beach house. That's not true. There was a long silence, and then the crocodile tears. Alice, are you blaming me? I've done my best. You're the one who. That night, Emily texted me. Mom says you yelled at her on the phone. Are you okay? I hadn't yelled. I just tried to tell the truth. But my mother's version of the story made me the bad guy. Jake and I sat at the kitchen table after Ava went to bed. He listened to everything. Then he said, Okay, so what do you want to do? I wanted to drive to the beach house in June and walk in. But he pointed out, What then? Your mother will deny it, cry, and turn everyone against you again. Jake grew up in New York City, in a big, noisy family, with lots of drama. He'd seen how adults can turn children into pawns in their battles. His uncle and aunt fought so bitterly over an inheritance that his 10-year-old cousin stopped going to family gatherings. He said, I don't want Ava growing up thinking her grandparents' house is a war zone. She's 4 now. She doesn't understand any of this yet. So, we decided to wait, to keep quiet until it directly affected Ava. Ava turned 4 that summer. She blew out the candles on a unicorn-shaped cake. She didn't ask about the beach house or grandma. Not yet. When Ava started 2nd grade last September, things changed. She'd come home from school talking about her classmates' summer vacations. Tommy went to his grandpa's ranch, and Lily stayed at her grandma's cottage by the lake. One evening, as she was eating her mac and cheese, she looked up at me and asked, Mommy, why don't we go to Grandma's beach house? My heart sank. Honey, Grandma's house gets crowded. She accepted it, like kids do. Then her teacher, Mrs. Johnson, called. Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was choosing her words carefully. Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to check in. Ava drew a family portrait in class today. It's just the three of you. When I asked about the rest of her family, she said she doesn't have grandparents on your side. I sat in my car in the school parking lot for 15 minutes, just thinking. My little girl, who is 8 years old, had already internalized the message my mother had been sending through her absence. A mom from Ava's class mentioned to me one day, Ava said she doesn't have grandparents on your side. I hope I'm not overstepping. I realized that my silence wasn't protecting Ava, it was teaching her the wrong lesson. My mother video called every few weeks, just enough to keep up appearances. If anyone asked, she could say, "Oh, I FaceTime Alice all the time." One Thursday evening in May, she called while I was making dinner. Ava grabbed the iPad from the counter, swiped to answer, and took it to the living room. I could hear their voices, but I couldn't make out what they were saying over the noise of the blender. For months later, Ava finally told me what had happened. She'd asked, "Grandma, can I come to the beach house this summer?" There was a long pause, and then my mother said, "Sweetie, the beach house is for our real family." Ava didn't cry or argue. She just said, "Okay, Grandma." What none of us knew at the time was that Ava had accidentally turned on screen recording before the call. She'd been playing a game and hit the wrong button. The whole conversation was recorded. Last September 15th, a Wednesday, I was quizzing Ava on spelling words for her test the next day. She got every word right. She smiled, but then the smile faded. "Mommy, why does Grandma say we're not real family?" My hand tightened around the notebook. "What do you mean, baby?" She told me about the call. She said the beach house is for real family and Daddy is different. I pulled her into my arms. "You are the most real thing in my life, Ava. Do you hear me?" She nodded, and I could feel her body shaking as she silently cried. After she fell asleep, I called Jake. He was on a business trip in Chicago. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "She said that to our daughter." "I'm done being the nice guy, Alice." The next morning, I sat Ava down at the breakfast table. I made her favorite pancakes with fresh strawberries. I kept my voice soft. "Ava, can you tell me again what Grandma said on that call?" She repeated the words, and I recorded her on my phone. After she left for school, I listened to the recording 3 times. Each time, it hit me harder. Then I picked up Ava's iPad. I saw the screen recording icon in the corner and tapped it. There was my mother's voice, clear as day. "Sweetie, the beach house is for our family, real family. Your daddy is different. You understand, right?" I knew I had to do something. I called my mother that Friday evening. "Mom, Ava told me what you said on the video call in May." She denied it at first, then tried to turn the blame on me, saying I was making a big deal out of nothing. When I asked her directly if she'd told Ava she wasn't real family, she hung up on me. 45 minutes later, Emily called. "Mom's really upset. She says you're being unreasonable." I hung up, feeling more determined than ever. Thanksgiving was 9 weeks away, and for the first time in 8 years, I told my mother I'd be there. Her reaction was overly enthusiastic. "Oh, Alice, I'm so happy you're coming. I'll tell everyone." Aunt Carol called me that night. "Your mom says you two have worked things out. Is that true?" I knew she was trying to be polite. I said, "You'll understand soon." Jake and I spent the next few weeks preparing. We saved the audio and video files to my phone and backed them up to the cloud. We tested the speaker volume in different rooms. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my mother called about the menu. At the end of the call, she said, "Alice, please don't make things uncomfortable. Just let it be a nice family dinner." 3 days later, Emily called. "Mom's worried you'll cause a scene." I replied, "I'm just bringing a pie, Emily. Relax." The night before Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about the seating. I knew my mother would put us at the far end of the table. Jake said, "Let her. It doesn't matter where we sit. It matters what we show them." When we arrived at the beach house, it was filled with people. My mother greeted us at the door, all smiles and perfume. Ava clung to my leg. Inside, the house was noisy with laughter and the sound of the TV. I saw Aunt Carol by the fireplace, Uncle David carving the turkey at the counter, and Cousin Mike carrying a bowl of mashed potatoes. Carol hugged me tightly and looked at me with concern. We sat down for dinner. My mother was at the head of the table, and I was seated at the far corner, as I'd expected. Ava sat between Jake and me, picking at her food. My mother led the conversation, talking about the beach house and all the fun they'd had there. Aunt Carol turned to me and asked, "Alice, why don't you ever come to the beach house? The kids miss you." Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Alice has her own life. We respect that." Uncle David shook his head and said, "Sue, you should make more room next year." After the main course, my mother stood up and said, "Let's go around the table and share what we're thankful for this year." One by one, everyone shared their thoughts. When it was my turn, I stood up. "I'm thankful that everyone is here tonight, but there's something I need you all to hear." The room went quiet. My mother's smile disappeared. "Alice, this isn't the time," she said. I ignored her and pulled out my phone. "I want you all to hear what my 8-year-old daughter asked me last September." I pressed play. Ava's voice filled the room. Everyone was silent, except for the soft click of the furnace in the background. My mother tried to interrupt, saying it was out of context, but I let the recording play to the end. Then I played the second recording, the screen recording from the May video call. My mother's face turned white. Aunt Carol stood up and said, "Sue, is that really your voice?" Cousin Mike said, "You've been telling us for years that Alice didn't want to come. That was a lie." My mother tried to defend herself, but no one was listening. Uncle David said, "Sue, she's your granddaughter. How could you say such a thing?" Aunt Margaret didn't say a word. She just stood up, put on her coat, and left with her husband. Emily looked at my mother and then at Ava. "Mom, did you really say that?" My mother was desperate, trying to explain, but Emily wasn't buying it. At the other end of the table, Uncle Tom finally spoke up. "I told you this would happen, Sue." My mother turned to him, pleading for help, but he just sipped his water. I stood up. "Ava, get your coat. We're going home." Jake was already on his feet, putting his arm around Ava. My mother tried to stop me, but I said, "Mom, we've talked for 8 years.
You chose to lie."
I'm choosing to leave." On the way out, Aunt Carol grabbed my hand. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," she said. I replied, "You couldn't." She was good at hiding it. Outside, the cold November air hit us. Jake unlocked the car and I buckled Ava in. She looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, is Grandma going to be mad?" I smoothed her hair and said, "Grandma is going to feel what she made you feel, sweetheart, and that's not your fault." As we drove away, I looked back at the beach house in the rear view mirror. For the first time in 8 years, I didn't wish I was inside. Ava fell asleep in the car, and Jake and I drove in silence. My phone started to ring. Aunt Carol called first. "I left right after you. Margaret and her husband went home. Sue is sitting at the table alone." Then Cousin Mike texted, "Alice, I had no idea. Ava is family, no matter what." Emily called later, crying. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "I tried, Emily. You always believed Mom's version." My mother called me 10 times that night, but I didn't answer. Jake made me a cup of tea, and we sat on the couch. He asked, "So, what now?" I said, "Now, I set the boundaries." The next morning, I received a text from my mother. "You've destroyed this family." I ignored it and went about my day. The fallout was swift. In 5 days, 5 family members distanced themselves from my mother. Aunt Carol told my mother that she wouldn't attend any event she organized until she apologized to Ava and me in person. Aunt Margaret sent me a long, hand-written letter saying she regretted not speaking up earlier. She and her husband stopped answering my mother's calls. Cousin Mike removed my mother from the family group chat. 2 more families declined the invitation to Christmas at my mother's beach house. The annual Christmas gathering that my mother had hosted for 25 years was in jeopardy. She tried to call everyone to fix things, but it was too late. The recordings spoke for themselves. My father called me a week later. His voice was cold. "Your mother is heartbroken. Are you happy now?" I replied, "Dad, Ava was heartbroken for months. Did you ever ask about her?" He hung up. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I received a letter from my mother. It was a half-hearted apology, saying she was sorry if I was hurt, but that she was just trying to fit in with the community. I wrote back, telling her that I needed her to take responsibility for what she said and to commit to family counseling if she wanted to see us again. 4 months later, in late March, Jake and I hosted a barbecue in our backyard. Aunt Carol, Uncle David, Cousin Mike, and Emily came with her sons. Ava was having the time of her life, playing with her cousins, laughing and running around. Jake put his arm around me and said, "She's okay. She knows where she belongs now." I looked at Ava and knew that standing up for her was the right thing to do. My mother and father weren't there, but I didn't mind. I'd set the boundaries, and it was up to her to decide if she wanted to cross them. This whole experience taught me that silence in the face of someone hurting your child is not peace, it's permission. I should have spoken up earlier, but I'm glad I finally did. If you're in a similar situation, don't wait for the perfect moment. The moment your child starts to believe the lie is the moment to act.